it was rude and just unkind. And he came home and he had to process, like, why would anybody do that? And I think that is such a gift for him to have that, I don't know, emotional intelligence of like.
Welcome to another wonderful day with another wonderful, beautiful lady that we have with us today called Kristin Chadwick. My God, did I get that right, Kristin Chadwick?
You did. Yep, that was pretty good.
Hallelujah. Part of my neurodivergence, as you know, second surnames I'm just rubbish at, but at least I got it right. Oh my God. Oh, the trumpet's going. So I'm really glad with that. So we've got Kristin with us today. As always, I know nothing about her. I don't know her backstory. I don't know what she's all about. We're just going to have that conversation and we're going to go with the flow. So by being boring, Kristin, I'm going to ask you, as I always do, just let us know what you do within your business to help people successfully so we can then go with the flow.
Yeah. Well, so I own a podcast production company, and within that, I manage quite a few amazing podcasters, and we are more than just a service-based business. We are heart-centered. So for me personally, faith is a huge part of that. And so I love coming beside, along with other podcasters, to use their voice. And so one of my favorite things to do is to make sure that everybody feels seen, heard, and known. So I coach my clients, and then I also invite anyone who has a podcast into membership, and we do group coaching or hear about the latest strategy in podcasting. So yeah, it's very a wholehearted approach versus just service-based, editing and publishing.
Interesting. So it looks like you actually deal with their mindset to see that first of all, if they're nervous or anything like that, you just find out where they're coming from.
Yeah.
And you try to deal with that. Does that sound correct?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we work with somebody who is nervous about pressing record, and they're like, oh gosh, I know I want to start a podcast, but I don't know where to start, or even if I have enough content within me. And it's overwhelming to start, to those go-getter achievers out there that are like, I'm recording a podcast and you're going with me. So everywhere and in between, that is who I work with. Okay,
so this is great because obviously I could do with some tips, as you already know, people. When it comes to podcasts. So I'm going to pick her brain. She's not going to know I'm picking her brain for free. She's not even going to charge me, and she's not even going to know about it. So let's see what we can get out of her. So, Kristin, let us know. Give us the worst scenario you've had with someone so nervous, so reckless in some ways, and you've just turned that around and then they've felt like a success.
Well, this is a good question. Well, I'll go with myself because that was me. I worked for another podcast from 2016 to 2020, and I was their content producer. So I came up with the content, but then I handed it off to the host, which they were a very well-known family. And so I was the behind the scenes girl. Well, one of the hosts was like, Kristin, we would love for you, Producer K is what my name was. We would love for you to come behind the mic and share. And I was like, I don't do that. I give it to you to record. And they were just so kind and really encouraging me to use my own voice. And so that was kind of the start of it. So let's see, I'll pick one of my clients that I've worked with in the past who...
Before we go on to one of your clients, you said about they allowed you to use your own voice. What exactly did that mean? Was that a situation they told you how you should react, how you should talk, or did they say, look, just be you, that's all that matters as long as you talk about A, B, and C? So how did that come about?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in that 4-year time period, it was more they wanted to invite me into the conversation for people to hear another perspective. So in that practicing, like, okay, how do I get what I've learned from this particular subject out of my mouth and onto recording? And so I would get feedback. I would get feedback from them after we were done recording, and they would say, Producer K, we loved what you said here, but maybe next time you could share a story that goes along with it. Or it was always encouraging. My biggest mindset thing at that point was my voice is annoying. And nobody would really want to hear my voice. They want to hear you. They tuned into this podcast to hear you as the celebrity family.
Yeah.
And so their coaching was more on a mindset level of your voice actually brings a lot of peace to our podcast and calm. And so really learning to lean into that instead of like, I don't have a grand personality that I come out,
I hear that.
Bells and whistles, and but I definitely have more of a quiet demeanor. And so them coaching me on embrace that for me being me and just be comfortable with that. And that's why people are coming to listen, especially because it transformed into a mom segment with one of the hosts of the show, and we did a little show together. And so people would come to the show to just listen to us two moms talking. And so yeah, it was just really a sweet mentorship and a leadership on how to be comfortable in who I was.
No, that resonates with me because for many a year, I didn't think I could use my voice or my face for so many years. And it's only really when I got fed up with being told, Eli, you've got a wonderful voice, you've got a wonderful face, you can be a speaker, you can do this, that, and the other. And I didn't for years. But I got fed up about that about 2 years ago. And I thought, no, something's got to be done about it.
Yeah.
And the same as you, I had to go through the same process. It is okay being different. There is nothing wrong with you. And it takes time, doesn't it? It's not something that happens overnight because of what has happened in the past, what's made you believe you can't and what's not possible. And now when I did a podcast this year, I did it from my point of view, which is just have a conversation, because with my neurodivergent, trying to have a list of questions and trying to remember this, that, and the other just wasn't going to work for me. So even though the gurus were saying, this is how you do a podcast, and I'm thinking, well, that ain't going to happen. So I think my skill set is being able to speak to people one-to-one and having a conversation. So why don't I do that? And I'll see what happens. And that's exactly what I did. Just like you, just be comfortable with your voice. You're unique, and there will be people that resonate with you. Not everybody's going to sound the same, and really that's not the ideal thing to do. So I get that. And thank you for sharing that, because it makes you a bit vulnerable, isn't it, when you say, I'm quite boring, really. I get that, Kristin. Honestly, I do. So thank you for sharing that. So as you was going to carry on saying, when I rudely interrupted you, that's my neurodivergent kicking in there. Do you hear that?
I do.
Words of, yeah, exactly. You're not supposed to agree with me, Kristin. You should say, Eli, I didn't
notice.
You didn't notice. Oh, that's even better. Even better. I like her now. I like Kristina. Yeah. So while I rudely interrupted you, I've done it again. Interrupted.
It's okay.
While I rudely interrupted you, you were going to give us an example of someone that's obviously had huge difficulty. And then you was going to say how you helped them with that situation.
Yeah. So one client that I'm thinking of in particular, she just had a really hard time just pressing record. And so it was always like we would meet every week and I'd say, hey, did you record your first episode? And she would be like, no, I just sat before the microphone and I erased it over and over again. I couldn't turn it in. And so over and over and over again, this happened. It was probably a good 4 or 5 weeks of me asking, okay, did you record your first episode? And one day on a call, it was a group that I was taking through the process of launching a podcast. And she says, I just don't like, who am I to start a podcast? And just like that, I was like, yeah, who are you? Who are you to start a podcast? I want you to answer that. And it actually was, those moments when you're like, that question was for me and for you and for everyone
of course.
Here. And it just was this flip the switch on, who am I to show up behind the mic? And she did record her podcast episode after that because she really stepped out of being stuck in her own head of who am I to do this? Who am I to share my life story or my faith story or whatever? But it really allowed her to get through that almost an imposter syndrome and step into really who she created to be and to be in this world.
Really interesting. Okay, let's find out where this passion is when it came to you getting into the podcast space. I'm interested in the roots. So we were talking a bit earlier on, just before you came on, whether you was neurodivergent, but you said the kids, your kids are. So tell me a bit more about the kids.
Yeah. So I have 4 kids. I have an 18-year-old, 16-year-old, and then twin boys that are 14. And my oldest has dyslexia, which now that I just said that, my husband does have dyslexia. It just never was diagnosed. So yes, it did start with both of us. So not just me. So my oldest.
That's a joke, a private joke, people, because I said it's always the man's fault. That's what I said, and she said nothing, and she just left it to him. But now she's admitting on air, oh yeah, I'm to blame too. So carry on, Kristin. Now we found out that you're always blaming the husband.
Oh, I am not. I am well aware of what I bring to the table. So my oldest has really struggled with dyslexia. And then my second to oldest has ADHD. And then my twins, one of them has ADHD as well. So that has been my world of, it's always interesting in our house. That's for sure.
Definitely. Colorful is the word, I think.
Colorful.
It's colorful, right? Now, this must have been baffling you when it comes to the twins, one having and not the other.
Yeah.
So I take it there was a blatant difference between the two at a certain stage. So when did that difference show to you and how old were they?
Yeah, I would say about 4th grade was when we started to notice. Well, no, I would say a little bit earlier, maybe 2nd grade. The teacher would call one of them the absent-minded professor. Okay. And so we knew with the older one kind of what to expect, but he displayed it in a little bit of a different way. More of the not hyperactive, but more impulsive and messy and hyper focused, and he could definitely hyper focus, but at school it was like no, give me all the creativity and let me be outside and I'm good. So that was probably the first noticeable time was when he was in 2nd grade. But then as he has gotten older, more and more it's just come through missing homework, getting in trouble all the time with the teacher because he can't stand still, and being the class clown, all of those. And the other one is like,
But it seems like he's my brother. The class clown. As soon as you said that, I definitely, it seems similar to me when I was a kid, for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so that must have been quite baffling because they were twins, and you would have thought, right, they were very similar, or they would be similar. Mm-hmm. So that must be quite difficult to actually try to treat them to be the same way. So obviously when you're disciplining them, you don't want to treat one different from the other because they're twins. So you don't want them growing up where one feels like, oh, you picked on me, mum, and etc. So I'm sure that's the case. Mm-hmm. Is that how that felt?
Absolutely. And to be fair, it's still, as they are 14, I feel like this is a very applicable topic as a parent, as a mom, is to be sensitive to. They are very unique people, mm-hmm. and they both need coaching and guidance and discipline in a specific way that doesn't crush their spirit. For one, it might look like this way, and for the other, it might look like this way. Mm-hmm. So, and I feel like that with all of our kids. All of our kids are so unique in how they respond to discipline, and that fine line of shame versus taking responsibility for yourself is very thin. Very thin.
No, totally. I can see it's a bit of a balancing act. It's hard enough for the average parent, but when you've got ADHD and you've got dyslexia at the and your older kids, so there is a balancing act going on, and especially it adds to the dynamics when you've got twins, where it's even more apparent when you treat one different from the other, and rightly so. You treat one different from the other because they have different needs, right? So it's not that you're being an unkind parent, but you're always feeling to yourself, as we do as parents, we feel guilty when you don't really want to discipline them or speak to them in a certain way, but it is what it is. Yes. It is the curse of being a parent. I totally get that. So, okay, so you've got the twins. One's ADHD. It's a bit of a balancing act. They're much older now, and now you've got the older one who's ADHD, who isn't a twin. What's the dynamics there? When did you realize he was ADHD?
Yeah, so he's my he has his own story. So he actually went through a very long season of sickness of a thing called PANDAS or PANS. So pediatric acute neurological streptococcal. I can't remember how you say it. Streptococcus. Basically, it's strep in the brain, which can present like OCD. It can look like very high anxiety. So in that season of when he was about elementary school all the way until 8th grade, he was just miserable. And our first conversation with the school was he's a square peg, or, a round peg trying to fit in a square hole, or opposite. And so we quickly realized that his brain wasn't as easy fitting into a school setting. And so our journey with him has been more of like executive functioning skills of, okay, did you write something down in your planner? And so learning how to utilize the aids of the school to help him remember to turn in his homework and to break through this almost like a mindset issue of I can't do this to I can do this, and I can see it all the way through. And so that's been his journey, and it was a heavy journey for a long season because it wasn't just ADHD, it was this other thing called PANS on top of that.
That was very difficult. And then you had the dyslexia with your oldest one.
Yeah.
And how did that manifest when you found out he had dyslexia? What things were showing when you thought something wasn't correct, and how old was he?
Yeah, so she is my only daughter. So she has, we were at a specific school where they learned cursive, which I don't know if you know this or not, but cursive shows, there's like studies talking about people who have dyslexia actually do better with cursive because you go in one fluid motion.
Okay.
And so we really didn't see it until we took her out of that school. We moved to a public school and we were like, what is going on? So until she really learned all of these little tricks for herself, because we were so consumed with the second kiddo and the twins, she had self-taught her own coping mechanisms on how to read and get through homework or studies with her own little tips and tricks. So fast forward to high school is when she started saying, Mom, I really think I have dyslexia. And I was like, okay, I don't know what to say. And then because I was already overwhelmed with my other three boys. And so I ended up meeting with the school counselor, and she was like, I just want to say that your daughter is one of the most fascinating human beings I've ever seen, because she has really learned how to cope well. And she's learned to speak up for herself of what she needs from her teachers. And so I'm just going to come alongside and help her actually get what she needs to graduate. So at this point, she really has been her own self-advocate. And of course, as a parent, I'm like, oh gosh, I'm so sorry. But it's really made her who she is. And she loves being different, and she loves, and she's very aware of like, okay, with math right now, she's in AP statistics and she's really finding it really difficult. And so it's a journey. So, but she's still advocating for herself, and she works, twice as hard as everybody else in that class because she's dealing with her own neurodivergence. And then
well done, Mum and Dad, because the reason why she's such a strong person is because of what's been going on in the household. You never neglected her. She saw what you was doing and what you was up to, but because she has now got the tools to survive and thrive independently, she's now ready for the outside world as she's growing through those stages. And so don't feel guilty. She got what she needed to have the strength that she has right now. And now not so worrying for you as a parent, because you don't feel like you've always got to spoon feed her. Do you see what?
I do. Yeah, that's a great perspective.
Sometimes we need, as children or adults, to go through certain hardships to have the right tools for us to forge forward, while other children or adults need to go through the opposite hardships. She just had what she needed to have, and you're proud of her because you can see everybody else is proud of her because they can't believe how she puts everything in motion and speaks up for herself and all that. And as parents, we want that for our children, don't we?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So now we've got the twins, and we've got your other boy, and we've got your daughter, and putting that all together, how is it really? How do you have them all communicate with each other? I suppose they obviously, because they're used to growing up with each other, but how do they all understand and appreciate each other with the issues they have? If it's a problem, maybe it isn't, but I'm just putting it out there.
Yeah, I think to answer that would be, I think we all understand that everybody is different in what they need. And we have all walked a pretty hard road together. And so being sensitive to where people are at, and there was a lot of holding space for my second kiddo that I really think will affect them the rest of their life. Of people can be really frustrated or be really in a terrible spot, but you can also love them exactly where they're at. And I think that's been a really beautiful piece, is to see how close they are with one another. And there's a lot of grace there, and humor. Humor is like a huge part in our family. Is we've got to make each other laugh sometimes, especially when we're like, we're all forgetting something, or we're all like on a little squirrely moment, that we're all in this together. And so I think that is a beautiful piece of having our kids grow up together in our family, is very unique and creative and funny and quirky and compassionate.
Of course. How wonderful. And you have a wonderful family, I can see. So as I say to people, it doesn't matter what neurodivergence you have whatsoever. It really doesn't matter, because being different is very important. Just like you're very different, and you did your podcasts, and people said it's okay being who you are, and you did some wonderful podcasts. And as well as your daughter, she's different, but she has that strength and forging forward. And that's a beautiful thing to see and understand. Everything doesn't have to be so-called perfect.
Yes.
So, and the word is so-called perfect.
Yes. So good.
Yeah, exactly. And Kristin, you're obviously a wonderful mother. You've had challenging times, but the thing is, if they weren't challenging, you wouldn't have such great kids that you have right now. And also you wouldn't have the strength in your family with laughter that you have. If you had to have those challenges for you to bond and get closer, and what a wonderful thing that is, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Very true.
Okay, so with yourself, because you must be neurodivergent somehow, right? Because there's no way you can have these beautiful, colorful kids, personality-wise, and you not be the culprit. So let's know where this lies. So tell us more about you, where this fault lies.
Yes. Well, it's funny because I grew up with a brother that had ADD. And so that was my experience of knowing what it was like. I mean, just the constant like touching, and like he couldn't walk by me without like a punch on the arm, or that was my world of what I understood ADHD or ADD to be. And so I never thought I had it until as a young mom, I had a good friend of mine who was very organized and just would come over to my house, and she would help me just clean up, organize things. And I'd be like, how did you do that? I don't understand. And she was like, you are my little squirrel. And I was like, okay. And she was like, you are. And then it just clicked in of how many times growing up, whether I was in school or at a small group in church, I remember my leader saying, Kristin, you cannot sit still.
Okay.
Like you are always wiggling. And it wasn't like drastic movement, but it was, I can't be still for too long.
Oh, wow.
So I would say, much like my daughter, I think I had my own coping mechanisms to help me stay focused when I need to stay focused. And it didn't look like my brother's neurodivergence, and understanding that it didn't always look like that. Yeah. And so that was when the like bells went off of like, oh, okay. Well, it's obviously not my husband that is bringing the ADHD in here. And I'm the one that's always leaving the cabinets open. And what was I doing? Why did I come in here? And so, yeah, that was really when it started to click in of like, okay, I can see that I'm I'm the culprit in this household right now.
I see. Well, you could be forgiven because by giving the gifts to your children, they're beautiful kids. So that's all cool. So that's wonderful. So as you were saying sometimes you go into a room and then you say, oh, why am I in there? So you was what they would call when you was a kid, scatty.
Yes. Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
So you was definitely a scatty one. So I take it sometimes your mother and your father used to go a bit nutty with you because you're thinking, what? Just give us a for instance that mummy and daddy would go nutty on.
So I loved playing sports. So one instance I remember, well, it wasn't one instance, it was many, where I would forget my glove to a game or a bat. And my dad would get so frustrated. He'd be like, you're literally going to a game and you have to have your glove. And I'd be like, I didn't think of it. So I just wanted to go to the game. So that would be one instance. I mean, multiple lunches forgotten, missing the bus, all those things.
Scatty, Kristin.
Yes.
Listen, I have to put my hands up. I'm the same way. My mother used to do a nutting. My father, especially, it always surprised him how scatty I could be sometimes. But that's another story for another day. So, as we can see, Mum was like that. Christina, you was like that. Mm-hmm. It's gone over to the kids. Now, you were saying something about the husband. What is your husband like?
Yeah, so he has dyslexia. But he was homeschooled, so he didn't really have the opportunity for another adult to see it, and so he really didn't know until he was older. But he, again, same thing, just very driven to learn how to work with this disability of his mind and how it works. And so that has been really cool to watch, really see him be successful in his business and in life, and his determination is really cool. Yeah.
And how does he cope with having dyslexia? Do you see certain things he puts into place? Or does he get someone else to help him with his weak points and then he focuses on his strength? What tools does he use to help him cope?
Yeah. Spell check is his best friend. I remember us being in college and he was like, I couldn't do this without spell check. Yeah. And of course he would have me read over his papers to make sure it actually sounded cohesive. And then, for a long time, he really avoided reading. For years, we were married, 2020, 2005 is when we got married. So 15 years in 2020, he never touched a book in all of our years of marriage. And he, in 2020, was like, you know what? I'm going to sit and read a book with one of our kids at the time. And he read The Hatchet with them. And the more that he read and made himself sit down for the sake of our son, the more he got comfortable with reading. And he literally reads every night now when we go to bed, which is like mind-blowing to me because it was so hard and so slow. He was such a very careful reader. And that was why he didn't want to read, it was a lot of patience for himself to sit down and read out loud. So the more that he read, the more comfortable that he got with reading. And so that to me is like, I can't even believe it. If somebody would have told me that in year 5, I'd be like, no way. He would never read a book.
But the thing is, he had great inspiration. He had these kids. He obviously watched you read a book, and he obviously saw the bonding period with the kids, with you, and he saw how their face would light up and the comments and whatever. And then he obviously realized, do you know what? I don't want to miss out on that.
Yeah.
And And that's what happens, you know. You just need that special thing just to tip you off of the edge and think life is too short. And I suppose he did that, and that's why it was a miracle you saw before. And yet again, the kids have brought on a miracle to help him.
Oh, for sure.
And is that not beautiful? You must have.
It is so beautiful.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And the kids are going to remember that, you know. You know, they'll be older and they go, oh, God, I remember when Dad, you know, read so-and-so book and the way you've read that and whatever. So those are the nuggets of life with your kids that you want them to remember, those warm moments. So I'm glad he actually read to his kids, and he's a happier man for it. So that's good. Yeah. So that's great. But the great thing is that even though he was dyslexic, he never made life stop him from doing what he wanted. He still had the strength and found ways around the issues he had, and still was successful and successful for his family. And that's what's really beautiful to see. A lot of people give up. I mean, I must admit, when I was younger, I didn't take on any further education because I thought that was it. I got dyslexia, that's it. But he did the opposite, and I respect that. And that's obviously why, or one of the things why you're so proud of him. So that's great.
Yeah.
So we've looked at your family. Two parents where it's their fault why their kids are colorful. Okay, fair enough. That happens sometimes in life. But by you all appreciating where you're all coming from, that's made for quite a beautiful, colorful family, don't you think?
Oh, for sure. I love it. I think that one of my favorite things is, so one of the twins' names, his name is Emerson. And he's the one that has the ADHD. And we call it an Emerism. Anytime that he spits out something that is so off the chain funny. I mean, it is like we live for Emerisms around here because it's unlike any other person's thinking. And I think that's such a great micro example of our family. And sure, we have our moments of frustration and we're annoyed and we're, you know, all of those things. But
of course,
those little moments of like, oh my word, you were hilarious and you are so such a gift to this world because of your perspective and how you show up.
Yeah. That's absolutely stunning. So where do you go from here with the family? So you're all neurodivergent in one way or the other. Have you got anything planned in particular that's quite unique because you're all very different, or you're just planning as normal, just going forward?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know if I've thought about it too much.
Because I'm sure that you have friends that have different type of kids, different type of relationships. You've had the cup of coffee, spoken between each other. Anything that made you think,
I think the uniqueness is, and what I find special about our family is we're all for one another. The typical consistent, like everyday sibling rivalry really doesn't happen in our household. I mean, yes, like the last week when we were all snowed in for 3 days, by the end of it, we were like, but there's such a deep thread of love and I don't know, there's a sweetness factor and a sensitivity, I think, for each other with my kids that because of all that we have walked through, like I mentioned before, I think there's a depth there that may not It may look different in a different family. And I do treasure that because I think it's very unique that they really do. They are kind to one another.
Mm-hmm. And I can imagine because of that kindness that follows outside of the family too, because they grew up with that. That's all they know, right?
Mm-hmm.
No, better still, it's not all they know. That's the example of all they know. You gave that example, and because of that good example, they take that out. And I can only imagine that the kids, not necessarily, I want for a better word, not life and soul of the party necessarily. I'm not saying they're loud, whatever, but they're in a group of friends where they're highly loved and respected. That's the word for it. Because of their core kindness.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I see that play out in my second kiddo. I mean, he's a sophomore and he is kind and he respects other people, to where he doesn't understand the meanness that happens. Like he had a situation at school a couple weeks ago where somebody was just being mean for being mean's sake. There was no, it was rude and just unkind. And he came home and he had to process, like, why would anybody do that? And I think that is such a gift for him to have that, I don't know, emotional intelligence of like, why are you acting like that? It's not worth it to act like that if you're going to push everybody away.
So what you've done really, you've installed in the kids some empathy, some natural empathy, so they can understand and empathize. Do you know what? That's quite an unusual skill for young kids, to be honest. And for you to install that through your play, the conversation, the love, interaction, that's actually quite a gift that you've given them. Well done, Mum. Well done.
I don't know if that was all. That was. I feel like that was, man, a gift from God and from just their own heart, though.
The environment is very important.
Yes.
The environment is so important. So yes, genetics, I believe, plays into it to a certain extent. But if you keep on hitting the wrong environment on those genetics, something's going to change. So as far as I'm concerned, the environment they're in is what creates them as good human beings. Maybe I'm just talking too deep now and overthinking it, but that's how I feel anyway.
No, I love it.
No, that's how I see it. That's how I say it. The environment is very important. And the environment is just not the immediate environment, such as the closed house, but it takes a village
for sure
to really look after the kids. Even though the core is parents, whatever, but it's very important who they interact with, the extended family, etc., etc.
Yes.
Anyway, so you've obviously not only got the immediate house sorted out, but you've got other things sorted that are connected to the family, and that's what shows me that. So yeah, oh God, I love speaking with you, Kristin. I love your situation. How wonderful.
Thank you.
How wonderful. Oh, okay, I could keep on talking about the kids and your family life, but let's talk about when you got older. So you had a brother that kept on punching you and doing whatever as he was going past and bullying you and all that situation. We get that. We have your scattiness and your craziness, and you know, your father was doing his nutting because you was always forgetting things. We get that too. So you come to college and whatever else and the situation there. How did your ADHD affect you when you started going to higher education?
Well, so on the flip side, my dad would always say, well, I never had good grades. That wasn't my cup of tea. But my dad would always say, if you find something that you're passionate about, you'll really hone in, and you'll probably get better grades if you find something that you're passionate about. So as soon as I went to college, I was like, oh, I want to study the things that I love. So I went right into psychology. I started taking all these psychology classes, and it was true. It was very much, okay, if I follow what I'm passionate about, I can focus more in class. And however, I will say, I still needed lots of help with focusing. So I would read my textbooks and then be like, what did I just read? I don't know what I just read. So I would practice like teaching myself. So I would read a paragraph and then I'd be like, okay, so if I was teaching this, I would explain it to this, or I would talk to my roommates about it. The other thing I would do is make very clear notes, note taking, to organize my thoughts. So that was really cool. And then, yeah, I think I really learned just different skills to bring in, not just note taking during class, but also the process of taking the information that I just consumed and then re-teaching it in a way that would actually stick in my brain versus a regurgitation. Because I never was good at that. I like the memorization stuff, not my cup of tea. So yeah, and then variety. I love variety. I love variety with everything, including working out. Like, do not give me the same workout every day. I will not ever do it. So I need variety. And so that looked like in school, like variety of settings of where I studied, or I walked and talked to myself, or it was in a new coffee shop, or just I need different things over and over again.
So you basically found out what you were about, found out what makes work for you, and so then you took that opportunity and you made sure you put things in place so that would happen. So that's great. So how did the podcasting side of it, the production side of it, how did you fall and hit into that?
Yeah, so growing up, my dad was in production and broadcasting, and so that was a big part of my story. Was I just remember going, and he worked for CNN and Turner Broadcasting Systems, and so lots of my childhood was in a studio or seeing people edit live baseball games, or and then my mom was a counselor, so you can see why I was like, oh, psychology. So I didn't think that I ever wanted to be in any kind of production until 2015. My dad passed away, and that was when my good friend, who was the first podcast that I worked at, he reached out to me and said, Kristin, I think that you would be really good at podcast production, and really helping us create vision and content for people, and to encourage people in their parenting and in their marriage. And so it really felt like it was out of the blue, but it really wasn't. It was basically them saying, do what you already do, but just take us there with you. So I basically got thrown into the deep end of learning podcasting in 2016. And that was when I started working for them for about 4 years. And then through that story of using my own voice in their podcast and kind of their covering mentorship, they encouraged me to step out and start my own podcast. And then I had more and more podcasters come and ask for help with production and editing. And then 2020 was huge, and people, asking, how do you start a podcast? How do you And I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to start a second podcast all about podcasting because I keep getting the same questions. So so that was kind of the journey through there. So a lot of my dad's legacy really just being ingrained in me. And then my love for psychology, I think, plays out in so many ways as a coach and consulting and marketing and all of those things.
So you was able to actually find your passion, which was psychology, use what you already grew up knowing, put it together so you could get pretty started pretty quickly because you're seen, studied, and then take it forward.
Yeah.
Aren't you lucky? Most people do a job that they don't really, and they fell into it and they do it because it makes money, but actually you're doing something that really resonates with you.
Yeah.
And how do you think that plays with the family? Your family are neurodivergent, all of you. How do you see that plays into the podcasting? How has that affected you? Because it has. Can you see?
Oh, for sure. I think with, I think that the multitasking and multi-passionate part of me is, this is such a great fit for me. My day can look like lots of recordings, or it can look like I would just want to create and be in content creation mode, or I can be in business, like we got to get the numbers done and accounting done and all of that stuff. So the flow, the being able to be flexible with myself and with my kids, because there were seasons where I was in podcast production and I had to be home. I had to come and get my kiddo. I have to go, even now, I have to go to the school to go drop off a lunchbox or a forgotten project. And the flexibility and autonomy with owning my own business, such as this, where it's a creative space, but also a space where I can encourage others to use their unique voice, and whatever that looks like, is kind of a sweet spot for me. And even in seasons of, like, we had seasons of homeschooling, one kiddo, and then seasons of everybody go to school or COVID or whatever it was. The flexibility, I think, is one of the biggest, just well put together flows of our life.
Yeah, and I put it to you also because, and I resonate with this because I'm a dynamic soul myself, and I cannot stand doing the same thing over and over again. That does my head in. I've got to have a different day, and I'm very good at thinking on my feet. And if you give me problems that I have to think on my feet, that's happy. But if you're going to give me the same thing, I am doing my nut. Sure. No, I get you. So what I'm saying is, because you're a dynamic soul, and because podcasting, especially production, is dynamic, and I understand that because I was a sound engineer many years ago and a studio engineer. So I know how dynamic it is when the podcast is supposed to take so long, but it ends up taking so long, or when something's supposed to. I get you. Right, we understand each other. Yes. So, and because you have that dynamicness to you, and you have that knowledge, podcasting works for you because of that flexibility needed when you're an engineer, be it for sound or the other things that go into it. And that's why I can see you sitting doing podcasting for many years to come, because it's comfortable, you know how to deal with it, and it's always different on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And how wonderful your story is. Can I say thank you so much for sharing this journey with us, because it is a beautiful story that you shared with us, with your family and with your podcasting. But we're not finished there yet. Well, yeah, that was the double whammy. Here we go. So now, with your business of the podcasting, how do you structure this now? Is this a one-to-one situation with a customer that you have, with a client? Or do you do group settings also? Or do you do events with corporates where you actually speak as a speaker? How does your business run from the point of view of helping customers?
Yeah. So yes to all of those. So I first I have my own podcast about podcasting to help teach. So, and really build that trust factor with people. And then my business is management. So I have 3 people that work for me now, that they're 2 editors. One is more of an executive assistant, and that really is my gift. They are a gift to me, because I could not do all of what they do. My role in that is more of overseeing all of the podcasts that we are gifted to and be entrusted with, and edit and promote them. And so I coach one-on-one those podcasters. And then I also offer a group podcast membership where 3 times a month we come together to bounce ideas off of each other. They can receive consulting on their podcast or strategy. We talk about how do we align our own voice and our content? Like, how can we show up as our most authentic self? And I mean, from everywhere from that to how do we, how do we pray about our content for this next year, or to what is the latest podcasting trend out there, and does that work? So one-on-one group coaching. And then, yes, I have spoken at conferences about podcasting. I would love to continue to do that on a bigger level than I have in the past, but it just hasn't been my focus yet in this season, purely because of the season of life that we're in. So that's my world.
Wow. Okay. So just let us know, how can people contact you if they need your help when it comes to podcasting, the production, and everything else wonderful with podcasting?
Yeah. Well, if you are looking for somebody to help you with the production side, you can definitely book a call with me. I offer a 30-minute free consult where we just go over what you're looking for specifically, and if we can fulfill that. If you're looking for community, or even just a podcast on podcasting to, know about equipment or how to launch or how to grow your podcast, you can find me at Podcast Coaching for Kingdom Entrepreneurs on any podcasting app. And of course on social media, Kristin Fields Chadwick is my handle on most platforms. So,
and as you can see, the reason why she's your woman, if she resonates with you, is because she's gone through the hardships, gone through the chaos also. She's got the experience, because obviously she learned this from her father, and then it came 360 degrees, came into podcasting, and she's wonderful to talk to, wonderful to listen to, wonderful to engage with. So she's the lady for you if you're interested in building a successful podcast. Kristin, thank you. Thank you for, I'll be honest, I've really enjoyed myself. I've enjoyed listening to you and your wonderful family. I know you've given so much to the listeners, because there's lots of people out there who are neurodivergent, thinking they can't do this, they can't do that. And by us speaking about our journey, which I did about mine and you did about yours, they'll be thinking, it is possible to do. And we do, listeners, have our ups and downward days. We haven't come out of the clouds and everything's all beautiful and rosy. We have up and down. Yeah, Kristin, you still have the up and down days, don't you? It's still difficult. You think to yourself, you don't sound great enough, or I'm not this. It still happens. It's just you learn how to implement the coping mechanisms. You get a bit closer to thinking, yeah, I'm okay, but it will stay with you for the rest of your life, most likely. But it just gets a little easier. Yes. But the point is, if you don't do, you will never know. And that's the worst thing. If you don't do, you will never know. Kristin, just leave us with one great thing to leave for the listeners. What is one thing you would like to leave with them?
I would love your listener, whoever is listening, that your story matters. And just like Eli was bringing out my story, your story matters too. And it deserves to be seen, heard, and known. And your story could change somebody else's life and give them encouragement and hope in this world.
And with that beautifully said, thank you, Kristin, for sharing that wonderful time. We welcome that you come again. I hope you come again. Another time we can have another chat about something more in depth. But thank you once again.
Thank you so much, Eli, for having me. You are a delight and so insightful. I just appreciate you and your thoughts too.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. And listeners, we appreciate you. Until next time, sayonara.